Greetings. I am so excited today about presenting to you our Young Adult Interfaith and Mental Health Collaborative. Here we're going to have a deep dive discussion on mutual understanding, respect, and mental well-being, particularly of young adults as it relates to religion and the various religions that are represented on this panel today to discuss how do we forge better relationships among each other. So to start off today, we're going to start out with introductions by each of our panelists, and I'm so excited to be with here today. Why don't we start with Ashley?
Good morning. My name is Ashley Bustamante, and I go to Cal State University, Fullerton.
Hi, my name is Melanie Morales, and I go to Cal State Fullerton, and I'm currently in my second year.
Hi, my name is Megan Delmond. I'm a second year at Cal State University, Fullerton.
Hello, my name is Jasmine Lars, and I am a junior at Cal State Fullerton.
Hello, my name is Catherine Garcia Guerrero, and I'm a first-year student at California State University, Long Beach.
Hello, my name is Rayanne Taryn, and I will be starting my junior year at George Mason University.
Thank you all. And I want to turn the first question to Jasmine Lars, who was instrumental in bringing the group together. Jasmine, why don't you start out by telling us what was the mission, what was the focus of this gathering, of this collaborative that we see here today?
Yes, so the focus of this collaborative was essentially just getting a group of young adults together and allowing them to have access to different museums. So we went to the African American Museum, the Bible Museum, the Holocaust Museum, the Armenian Genocide Museum, and the Muslim Museum. And this gives them access to be more aware of different religions and the different struggles that each culture, religion has gone through, and to help them become better understanding on and to come up with an idea on how us youth can help create more empathy and start having a conversation to start healing our communities and our youth. So that was the main mission of our collaborative, is just healing and bringing community and more empathy.
Wow, that's powerful. So when I think about the struggles that you witnessed as you did these visits, Catherine, why don't you start out by telling us what type of impact did that have on you?
Yeah, gladly. When I was doing the tours in the museums that Jasmine previously mentioned, one thing that I really took out of this was, wow, I knew that there was going to be so much information that was going to be given to me or thrown at me, but there's so much more that I did not know that I didn't know, and just goes to show how much you have to go out of your way to learn about certain topics to actually be able to learn about it. But yeah, it's and it was like all of them were equally as like informative and very interesting experiences as well, especially as I'm growing up into adulthood, as I'm entering the real world, as I'm going through college. I'm able to go through it with more knowledge and have more information with me to not only know how to guide myself when it comes to topics and discussions like these, but also when it comes to interacting with other peers who are either in similar or different beliefs, and we have those conversations.
What did that teach you, thinking through your journey, going from museum to museum, feeling and sensing the pain of various religious groups and the people? What did that do? What did that reveal to you in your own personal space? Let's start with Ashley.
So I think this was an incredible experience because I could understand more about the pain of others, and also by understanding the pain of others, realize the pain I felt about some experience. And also it made me think more about mental health and how mental health is really important, but we have to take care of not getting mental health in an egocentric mood, because I feel like mental health should be like the start point to start our healing pathway, to start helping other communities that need our interaction, and to start empathizing more with others.
That's a good point. And when you think through, Melanie, when you think through, that it made you more conscientious about the mental well-being of others, as well as thinking through your own mental well-being in that which you saw. Can you just highlight something that really stood out in any of the museums or educational moments that you can share with our audience?
So I want to start off by saying that this experience was incredibly helpful, and it was a very good experience. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to be able to go to different museums. But one of the biggest takeaways for me was, growing up, I always thought that I grew up Catholic, and I always thought that that was my religion, and that was that religion that was chosen for me. My parents kind of raised me to be Catholic, but after being at the museums and knowing that there are so many different religions, and that when we went to the Muslim museum, that so many Hispanics have converted to Islam, and I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that Hispanics could convert to Islam. I was aware that it was always the Catholic Church. I wasn't aware that if we wanted to seek another religion, that we could go ahead and do it. I was just always taught to follow the Catholic faith and follow the Catholic belief. And after being able to go to the Bible Museum and seeing how many religions there are and how the Bible has had a huge impact on the world, I want to know what's next and what we can do better to help others that are suffering from the same thing.
So it's widen your lens on understanding not only the various religions, but also the various ethnicities that participate in these religious groups. What were some of your takeaways as it relates to, Megan, the mental health and the pathway of healing? And as we think through that, some of you, we talked about the fact that it allowed us to validate the other's pains, then shame the other pains, or ignore the other pain, or dismiss the other pain. Can you speak more to that in your experience?
Yeah, I think that was a great question. I think as we continue to go to these exhibits and these museums, we learn more about the kind of range and the diversity among these faiths and religions. And I think what was interesting to me was seeing the diversity among these communities that are practicing, the intersection of identities like Black in practicing Islam, and like Black in practicing like different religions and just different races as well. And I think it was very important to kind of see this kind of community formed around religion, but also to know the history of religion was very important. Because when we talk about the religions we have now, we also have to recognize the history of how that religion came into these different regions. Some were with violence, some were through peace, but we have to realize that the assimilation of these cultures and these faith practices have a deeper meaning, and some aren't always in a positive light. And I think through recognizing the different pain these religions could cause within different ethnicities, within different regions, is very distinct to that person, and in understanding these identities and their relationship with their own faith.
Jasmine, you want to add to that as we think through what was most impactful for you, or some of the things that were impactful for you as we take this journey on mental well-being, as we take the journey on respect and understanding the other?
I think something that has stuck out for me from all the museums, I think for the Holocaust and Armenian Genocide Museum, what stuck out to me is that a lot of people were aware of what was going on, and they kind of just ignored the issue at hand. And a lot of the survivors of each genocide have talked about how other communities try to ignore or deny the events that have happened, and how hurtful that is, because then it feels like, that those lives didn't matter, or that their suffering didn't matter. And I just realized that how much history is gonna repeat before we start taking action when we see like a genocide happening right in front of us. And I think it was very hurtful just going to those museums. I know, like for the Holocaust Museum, when we actually went through it to actually able to see it, it was very hard, so kind of had to cut that part short. But in my head, it's just, when is enough going to be enough? Or what's it going to take for people to finally start speaking up and just advocating, and why are we so afraid to save lives? Like, why is a life able to be ignored? And that's what's very just hurtful for me. And it's, it's even children that are being a part of this, and it's just like, why don't certain people matter to others, and why can't we all just understand that we all deserve to live, and we all have our differences, but our differences are what make us so unique and so impactful to the world. So that is what's really has stuck with me.
Wow, so powerful. Rayon, can you add to that from your lens, from your perspective, as we're thinking through, is history repeating itself? Has history changed in this regard? Has it, continued to repeat itself? And thinking through your experience, and just, I know, as you even walk through the Bible Museum, but even in your personal space. Rayon, would love for you to piggyback on Jasmine comments.
Well, yeah, I think history is repeating itself, especially, with the genocide that's happening in Palestine. And I think history is repeating itself, but it's also changing in the fact that we have so much information available to us. You can go online and find anything about any religion, whether it be bad or good. And that can lead a lot of people towards a dark path when it comes to faith. And I think that this experience and watching history repeat itself, especially in me in the Muslim community, we recognize what's going on, and we see that, it's a problem, but when we look to our peers, more often than not, they don't think it's a problem. So being in a space where I could openly talk about my faith, and I can openly talk about this problem with people who wanted to hear more about it, was just so impactful because, like I said, we live in a society where we have so much information available to us, and we unfortunately don't use it to the benefit of our mental health and others' mental health. We use it to benefit our own perspective and what we think is right. So being in a space where people wanted to know more, and learn more about my faith, really kind of instilled a sense of responsibility within me to want to know more about other people's faith. And, I now want to learn more. I want to attend the museums that I wasn't able to, like the Holocaust Museum and the Armenian Genocide Museum, and, learn more about, yes, how history is repeating itself, and how can we change history with the, tools that we have with social media, especially as young people. It is our responsibility to go on social media and to facilitate these conversations, because they are very important. Not a lot of people think they are, but it's important to have open conversations about these things rather than, digging a hole for yourself of information that you find. So seeking that information from reliable sources about other religions was just amazing. I got to see the history of the Bible, a book I've never read. I never thought I would go to the Bible Museum as a Muslim. I told my family, and they were like, "What?" Yeah, but it did really make me feel like I was a part of something bigger, and it reignited my faith. Yeah, because it showed me that faith is the common denominator in all of these religions. And, that's what we need to have, faith that we're going to get better and faith that we can do better. And yeah, I think a lot of people lack that today. So, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for your perspective. Faith that we can do better. And the fact that you've experienced the validation of your pain, which tells us that that's important. That we just have a place to express ourselves, but a place to express ourselves that is safe, that is welcoming, that is understanding, where others are not in a judgment mode, but more in how do we work together? How do we come together as young adults? Cheering up. To change this narrative. And this narrative that has been repeated over and over again, to hear Rayon just say he felt hope, even in the midst of the current climate in our nation, he felt hope. Catherine, in that regard, I also want you to share your takeaway from your visit at any of the spaces that was such a highlight. And how did you feel, even with the interactions with the various religions, including Rayon's, et cetera? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first of all, like also to like piggyback off of your last question, and
Yes.
I do agree. Like not only is history repeating itself or changing slightly, it doesn't stop. It does not stop for anybody, and the only thing that we can really do is make some sort of difference. And yeah, like while attending all of these museums, I for my personal background, I born and raised from like Mexican parents who came from who came to the United States, born and raised Catholic, and it was really interesting to see how much of Catholicism and like Christianity has kind of merged its way into history. Especially considering, well, not everybody is going to share the same religion, and unfortunately, like as we were also able to learn throughout these museums, a lot of people back in history didn't really care, and it wasn't really as much of there wasn't really much of a safe environment back in the day to be able to express our differences in spirituality or religion or even ethnically and such. And it really just goes to show one of my key takeaways from this whole experience was definitely how so many people with the kind of power that they do, and with all the information that they have, unfortunately, that information that they have and the power that they have is not really used in the best way to be able to help others. Like my peer mentioned previously, like a lot of it is just used for our own for like their own personal gain or for political power and such. And yeah, and it really it opened my eyes a lot more, especially with everything that's going on in the world, in Gaza, or the war and like the suffering that was taking place in Ukraine as well. It's so much that we still have to learn. History is still going to keep going whether we want it to or not. But the main thing that we do need to make sure is that not only are we aware and keeping informed of our history, but we're actually making good decisions and doing positive exercises like these, having these kinds of conversations where we open up about topics which would have been taboo about a decade or centuries ago and such. And yeah, overall it's been to put into words, because there's so much information that I can only really fit in. It's something that, especially as leaders of tomorrow, basically, by being able to learn about all of this, something that we can take away is that we can use this information for good and for a better society, a better future, a better tomorrow.
Appreciate that, Catherine. And to one of the things that Rayon said, this is something that needs to continue, so it needs to be a movement, and that movement needs to be led by you, by the young adults, by your generation, that can, not just help us that may be a little bit further removed from what you're experiencing. What you're experiencing firsthand. And I think this movement needs to be spearheaded by you, and it is something that needs to be continued. And so when I think about the journey, Melanie, that you experienced, particularly as it relates, let me go to, Melanie, and as it relates to what it did for your own mental health. Can we talk about the experience of the transformation that took place in your own mental health as a result of walking through this experience?
Of course. So before touring these incredible museums, I really suffered from religious trauma. Growing up, a little bit of a background story, my parents tried to push my religion on me a lot, and it kind of just made me not really want to be religious. It was just very hard for me just because it was really pushed onto me. And after touring these museums and seeing how different each religion is and how incredibly beautiful they are, they're all equal in their own way, I got to think, and before touring the museums, I actually attended mental health resources on campus. I saw a counselor for my religious trauma, and it got me thinking, wow, we really need more people that understand different religions. We need more people from the background. Like, I wish the person that I was talking to was able to understand me better. It was kind of hard to kind of just like get my point across and kind of to feel heard and understood from what I was suffering, from the pain I had inside me. And I just wish that on college campus especially, that we had more people that had the same background as me. Like, if we had more different people who had different backgrounds of religions, I feel like that would be really helpful, because in that moment when I was suffering, I was just thinking it would be incredibly helpful for me if I were to have someone with the same background of religion as me, someone that understood where I was coming from, the pain that I felt. And so after touring the museums and seeing how many religions there are, that there are other people who are suffering from the same thing, and we have to do more, we have to do better for the future generation too. I see it as a big problem, and I see it as a problem for us, as our generation needs to address for other generations. We need to do better, not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
Thank you for that. And so we're looking at what you're saying is we need colleges and universities to think through how do we incorporate more culturally competent counselors, those that are religious, embrace religious competency, and of course cultural humility, that would help those that can better identify in their own space of religion. And thank you for sharing that. Ashley, let's turn to you as we think through some of the other recommendations that we would have as we're thinking of promoting mental well-being, emotional well-being, and acceptance and mutual understanding.
First of all, I think that we have to emphasize more mental health problems, and also to start looking people but try to understand them first, their backgrounds. We cannot help people that we don't know and people that we don't genuinely feel like understanding them first to start helping them. And also I feel like most of people don't feel like that they have the right to express themselves or to share their expressions or raise their voice, because it is really scary. And I know it's scared to raise your voice, it's scared to advocate for the people that you love, but it's even more scary to don't have a voice at all. And I also think that we sometimes lower our voice because we feel like we are not old enough or we don't have experience at all. Or if you are kids, as a kid, I always felt like I didn't have a voice. And now as a young adult, I feel like a little bit scared to don't have enough experience to share. But I feel not matter in which stage of your life you are always going to have a great things to share. And you are always going to have that power to support the community. And I feel like every people should be able to share what they think and their beliefs, because the world needs to hear your voice.
That's powerful. So we need to give people the right to express themselves. We need to lead with empathy and understanding. And we don't need to lower the bar because we don't have to despise our age, our youth, and we need to be able to have the freedom of expression while validating the other. Thank you for those powerful takeaways. Let's turn it over to Megan in this journey, the journey that was so rich and that I can sense and know that there's rich deposits and rich movement that I feel that is going to continue moving forward. So Megan, would you share some tips that you want or recommendations that you want the audience to embrace? What more can they do? Or what more can young adults do to continue the movement toward healing, self-respect, respect, and mutual understanding?
Yeah, that is an amazing question. I would say, especially as a youth and as someone who is on college campuses, I think there are far too many instances across the board where people are feeling targeted based on their faith, based on their differences. And I think that now more than ever, we see a need that there needs to be more safe spaces on campus where we could form a community where people don't feel stigmatized in their practicing of their religion or their faith background. I think having these resources on campus, creating like classrooms, creating spaces that we do for dreamers, for Asian Americans, for African Americans, in that same way, we need to provide the same resources to different faith backgrounds so that students feel like there is hope, that there is resources out there for them to gather and to come together, whether it's in form of mutual understanding, whether they want to join in protest, having that support among the community where they could practice this freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of protest, I think is really encouraging, especially as we're seeing a lot of protests happening across different campuses for Palestine. I think it's more important than ever to make sure that we are pushing the freedom of speech and allowing students to express their voices for people that may not have voices right now, as Ashley said.
Megan, just to piggyback so we can provide greater clarity for the audience, to give us the distinguishing pieces between freedom of speech and hatred, right? So hatred versus freedom of speech, and where does love fit in through all of that, to all of that, in your estimation?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as we're seeing, like, freedom of speech is being used to justify hate speech sometimes, and I feel like that's where it's getting confused, because a lot of the intention that is driving movements should be from love and should be rooted in love, but we could see that a lot of malintent is causing the targeting and the prejudice of different groups, of marginalized communities especially. And I think as we're going forward, as we are joining in solidarity, that we join in love and we join in pure heart in being able to stand up for other people and not out of a place of targeting others or having to put someone down in order to get your point across. I think we need an increased amount of empathy when having these conversations, when trying to get this messaging across through media, through press, through everything, because we want to be able to have a unifying cause, and I think that's what they're doing, and I really love to see it.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for clarifying that. I love that increased amount of empathy, and that we need to move through the power of love and not hate. And also recommending to our colleges and university the need to have more safe spaces on campuses. That's also important. Jasmine, turning it over to you for final comments in this space as well.
For me, I honestly think it's going to start with yourself. I think we have to look into our own self and be able to learn that we have biases that we have to learn to overcome. And I think once you start with yourself and start improving on not being ignorant and just being willing to learn information and just being willing to listen, not speak. I think that's a big one. Just just learn to just listen and not always try to say something else. I think that is when we're going to start healing. And then once you start with yourself and improving upon your education, you can move on to your family, your friends, and this will just start sparking conversation and having people become more aware. I think we also have to learn that everyone's pain is valid. It's not a competition on who went through more or who went through less. Everyone is valid. Pain is pain, and we all just have to be understanding if we want to come together. So I think that's how we're going to improve.
Powerful. Start with self. Learn to overcome our own biases. Be in a posture of a learner. You moved into the power of listening more so than speaking. I always say that listening is really the most powerful form of communication. And that will move us, you said, to healing and recognizing that everyone's pain needs to be validated. I appreciate your feedback, and hopefully the others do as well. Catherine.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So for final remarks, as a lot of us have probably seen on the internet, there is a mental health epidemic that has been taking place here in the United States, and unfortunately, there is also so much of a lack of resources that are provided to those who are suffering from mental health in the country, and I really do agree, and I really do believe that one of the main things that we can do, even if you're not a licensed therapist or anything, one of the main things that you could do is listen. Because honestly, the main thing that you want to do as you're starting any conversation or as you're trying to connect with anybody, make sure you listen. Make sure you understand every single point that is important to make sure that you're not only are you guiding an idea towards the wrong direction, but also making sure that you don't accidentally make that person feel not validated with the way that they're feeling and such. And I really do believe, and I agree that one of the main things that we could do is listen, but also at the same time take action. There's so much that we can do. There's so much that we could do, whether it's being part of nonprofits, donating to charities, like participating in community service activities, and even just opening yourself up to having conversations that a lot of people are uncomfortable with having. And I think that's one of the biggest first steps that we could take to make that initiative and put your best foot forward to inspire other people to do the same.
Powerful. Rayon, you're gonna close us out. The word that really lingered were take action. And what would those final recommendations be from you as we think of taking action to promote peace and promote healing and promote mental well-being? What does that look like? I know one of the things you talked about was some of the things we would do on social media, but whatever else you would like to contribute there would be appreciated.
Well, what I learned through this experience is religion, in essence, is trying to be the best version of yourself. So my message to the younger people is to seek the knowledge that makes you become your best self. Seek the knowledge within all of these religions that allows you to approach people's pain and your own pain, whether that be religious or just ordinary mental health problems. It will allow you to approach these problems with clarity and with the intent to do better and be your best self. And then spread that knowledge. Spread that knowledge on social media, through your outlets. Let everyone know about these resources, like all of these museums here in DC, and I know there are more museums throughout the country that promote the knowledge of the best self. Seek that knowledge out, because that knowledge is in the pursuit of something better, and the pursuit of that knowledge is love. All of that information is going to be love. So once you attain that knowledge, you'll be able to spread that love to yourself and to others. So, yeah,
Powerful. Powerful. So seek the knowledge to make you become your best self. Spread the knowledge with whatever channels that you can spread it to, whether it's social media or other, because knowledge is power, and ultimately it's going to lead us to love. And that is the foundation from which we live our faith. It's through the power of love. And so thank you, amazing, amazing individuals on this earth that I am privileged to sit with on this day, to hear from you. And I want to encourage everyone, if you are suffering at all from any type of mental health challenges, to find a support group that you can feel comfortable in, where you can freely express yourself without judgment. In addition, here at the United States Department of Health and Human Services, we have a 3-digit number that you can feel safe to chat, call, or text, and that is 988. It has helped so many youth. Our numbers have increased dramatically because of the text and chat feature, where you don't have to disclose your religion, your name, your age, your immigration status, and it's available 24/7. We all want to see our country and our world at large in a safe space of being able to seek help for mental health services when needed. And we here at the United States Department of Health and Human Services have resources just for that. And we are so thankful for those that have said yes to being a part of our first collaborative, and I feel many more to come, so that we can promote the healing that our nation need, not just on our college and campuses and universities, but around our world. And it's going to take our young people to do just that. So thank you for joining us. Have a great day.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.